Everyone, let's get started on our meeting today. Thanks so much for joining us. And feel free to add any agenda items if you have any. To get started, let's see, this is our last meeting for 2023. It has been really great so far, the regularity of our meetings and the attendance. And our next one will be in January 15th. We are taking the break for the holidays. I know a lot of folks will be going on vacation, as well as like just everyone is busy around this time. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who helped get this subgroup started, who show up to the meetings consistently and provide like great feedback and conversation. And special thank you for those who have actually like picked up different enhancements related tasks. I'm really excited to see contributions towards enhancements increase next year. And I want to give thanks to everyone who advocate for enhancements across like in our working group meetings, on PRs and stuff. It's really good to see that the overall community is really starting to think about our enhancements and make that like one of our decision making factors. So thank you everyone. It has been really good like getting this subgroup started, and I'm excited to continue the momentum. Next up, the only main topic today is around proposal today, sorry, is around the Istio API's release and versioning model that I shared in the last subgroup meeting. I was hoping to share it in last working group meeting as well, but time ran out. So I will share it this week. And as of now, the biggest question is if this is something that we want to pivot to in the community. Um, the reason I would love to get like this general thumbs ups because once we get this, we can continue the work to like really flesh out the Istio specific design requirements for adopting this. And since there are a couple folks who are on the call today that weren't on the call last week, like I can go ahead and share the proposal and give a high level again. Give me 1 second. Okay, great. So this is an attempt to really improve how we do API versioning in Istio. We have been using Gateway API approach as an example, but Gateway API is different to Istio, and we hope that through saying yes, we want to make a transition like this to improve some of the frictions we currently have. We can really think be intentional about how we want to support APIs moving forward, especially as we want to clean up how we do API graduation and like the removal of tech debt and so forth. But for the most part, the key motivations behind this was that features within an Istio API exhibit varying levels of stability. So for instance, even though we have like a beta API feature, there are like fields within that beta API that are still either alpha or experimental. So those features have like independent feature life cycle. And at this point, we don't really have any tooling that help us manage or respond to that. For the most part, we just have a flag that says deprecated. And as we know in Istio, well, in Kubernetes CRDs, there's like a known challenge behind like converting between API versions that have different schemas. So far, we have chosen not to like deal with this by using webhooks, and we pretty much enforce identical schemas for all versions of the same CRD. And right now, STOD is sort of designed to just read like the latest version, the oldest version of an API, so like the very first version of that API. And that created a new problem where we now have deprecated or unstable features that are present in all CRD versions, whether it's the alpha or the beta. and we don't necessarily have like appropriate feature gating to ensure that users are actually getting the functionality and the gating for their specific like stable version that they are trying to use. Um, and then also we have seen that right now we have like experimental, alpha, beta, and stable phases, and this require a lot of like operational oversight to like manage the progression and the removal of these like API features and versions in Istio. And across the board, we really don't see much benefit in having like all of these different stages, especially since the delta between the criteria is very hard to like incentivize as well as like really see like the true benefit from it. Over that. And as such, we are proposing simplifying all the different API versions to really get down to two versions. One is unstable, one is stable. And that brings us to this section where Gateway API took the approach of using release channels for doing this, where they created an experimental channel that has like, of course, the experimental and like the GA APIs in it. You can think of this channel as like a superset of like the standard channel, which is designed to be the channel for stable features, and they created these separate channels so now that we can have different versions of CRDs without the need to gate the features. And users will use like the standard channel to get guaranteed stable features, and the experimental channel to either experiment with certain features or fields within the features that aren't stable as yet. So for the most part, like I said, in the standard channel, the APIs will just be V1 kinds, and they're stable. Any changes that is done to them are compatible. If there are any new fields or features that would be added to a stable API, that would be done in the experimental channel here, and those fields will be able to go through their independent life cycle of being tested, improved, and once they meet the graduation criteria to be promoted to stable, they will be graduated to the V1 API in the standard channel. In the experimental channel, we will start with a V1 alpha 1 kind, and any new fields or objects of the same kind will be incrementally increased. Craig raised a comment in the sense that maybe we want to leverage, instead of saying alpha, let's use experimental, so that we can really hone into the fact that these are experimental CRDs, and we don't want to not necessarily conform, but mix the language of alpha, beta in this approach. So that's something that if you have any strong opinions on, you can contribute to. I really liked it because we are already using like the experimental word, so why not? In the experimental channel, we allow break-in changes, and here we will have features and APIs that are unstable. We have to figure out how unstable we want the experimental channel to be. But these are like design details that we can really flesh out once we can answer the question of like, do we want to make this change? Um, so let's see. So yeah, so that's a summary of what this proposal is doing. I think this will be sort of like one of the standards the Cloud Native community adopts for managing API versioning. Gateway API has spearheaded this, and there are a couple other like SIGs within Kubernetes that are adopting and making a transition too. So I'm hoping that we can decide to make that transition, and this started based on my attempt to promote the Istio telemetry API to beta and realizing like the current way we do that. It has a lot of red flags. So I'm hoping that we can adopt this in the spirit of improving our enhancements as well as using the telemetry API as the first API that we promote in this way. So with that said, I would really love for those who have time to like review this over the holidays and thumbs up if this is a transition, keeping in mind like the details still need to be fleshed out. And I can pause now if anyone has any questions or comments top of mind. Cool. Okay. And then from
Whitney, I have a question regarding the Gateway API. They've been the first adopter of this pattern, I think. How many cycles have they gone through of promoting features using this pattern?
I know that they originally switched to this approach in 2022. So they have at least had a year of features that have been promoted in this pattern. And this year they did the approach of dropping beta. So I can't necessarily say how much features for sure, but I know they have been using this for at least 1 year. And I spoke with Rob and others over at Gateway API, and they said like the biggest issue and like they had in adopting this was really nailing down the graduation criteria to make sure um, users are confident that stable is stable, as well as there's like a really clear pathway for people who use experimental to not get stuck in just using experimental features. Yeah.
And is the idea here that the key problem we're solving is that alpha and beta signal to our customers that these are not ready for them to use?
I believe.
Go ahead.
Okay. I believe the key problem is that right now we have APIs that are supposedly beta or stable being served, and within it there are unstable features. So, how can we ease like really delivering a stable API to our end users while still ensuring that we have the flexibility to experiment with new features? And those that really just need to use stable are protected from that experiment.
So is there a reason we couldn't accomplish those objectives within the current framework of alpha, beta, and GA?
Um, no, other than the fact that it's a lot of overhead. Like for instance, we can still in this experimental channel, we can still keep like experimental alpha, beta, and then GA, and maybe even beta in the standard channel. Like we can still decide to do that. I just don't see right now the I guess the benefits of doing that.
Okay, the idea being that it's more because there's multiple promotions that have to happen. First it goes alpha to beta, then beta to GA, and this reduces it to one step.
Yes, for the most part. And I outlined a couple of costs of API, maintaining a lot of API versions here as well. But yeah, and that part of the proposal, I'm happy to either spin out into like a future improvement of this, if that helps adoption of the channel, the release channel approach. But for the most part, I really believe like the extra overhead isn't beneficial, especially as of now, we don't really have a good momentum with any promotion.
Yeah. One last question. I know that we've kept all of our alpha, beta, and GA versions consistent in Istio due to some technical limitations in offering multiple versions of a single API. Have those technical limitations been overcome, and that's what's allowing us to offer a different experimental than GA? Or do we still need to dig into those limitations?
We need to dig into those, and I think that will be a needed implementation before we can really adopt this.
Okay.
But
Thank
I
you.
think it's time for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Whitney. I appreciate it.
No problem. Great questions. Any other questions or thoughts? Sorry, my presentation crashed. Give me 1 second. Okay, great. So I guess other than like general thoughts around this, my other question would be like key persons to sign off on this. As of now, I have John, Mitch, and Eric, and I chose you all based on like a test and release slash user experience approach. Do you all think there should be any other key individuals involved in approving this?
That seems right to me. Ultimately, it will require TOC approval because we're changing our feature maturity, but I think this is a good place to start.
And I was, I guess, optimistically hoping to get like consensus before the end of the year. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like a more realistic timeline to approve that, yes, this is the direction that we want to go without necessarily like the implementation and the fleshed out details?
Well, my gut tells me that in order to pull this off with our API maturity, we're going to need to probably reflect those changes into feature maturity as well. I don't know that it would make sense for us to have API model that is experimental and stable and a feature model that is experimental, alpha, beta, and GA, and then have to try to map between those, which means biting off more changes. Like this is already this is a proposal, and it would become bigger in that case. And I'm of course wary of that, but at the same time, I don't want to present a model that is more confusing to our users.
Yeah, I think we could take two approaches there. We could either postpone the drop-in of beta or figure out how we want to include the feature maturity into this. And I believe John agrees that we definitely want to adopt this across feature maturity on a whole, especially as ambient graduation is up for discussion right now. But I'm wary of inflating the scope as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be as, sort of as simple as, from an API standpoint, beta and stable would be, the non-experimental, and any, alpha and experimental become, from the API side, experimental is, feature side experimental and alpha. I don't know if we could have a mapping there.
Yeah, that actually is a great point. We need to know what will happen to our existing features that are at various levels of maturity and our existing APIs that are at various levels of maturity.
And is this a wholesale change, or is this a change as we move forward, sort of?
I propose as we move forward, where telemetry API will be the first API we adopt this with, and then as the enhancements group, as well as like the general community, identify higher priority APIs to go to next. I expect we will be rolling this out that way.
I mean, that makes sense.
And that gets tricky if we include the features, the wider other features as well. Like to be able to roll out the changes to those will be a very long lift, a big lift. Cool. Okay. If nothing else in regards to this topic, we can move on to the next. Thank you everyone for the feedback. Right now we have open requests for like design proposals, as well as like just anyone who's interested and have the bandwidth to pick up the work associated to deprecating in cluster operator. John has outlined a good bit of like starting points, and we are simply looking for someone who can select which one or like which solution they think is best and create a proposal for that. I think I will continuously, I guess, evangelize this work until we get someone to, pick it up. But this is another enhancements work that we have identified as high priority. And let's see. Next up is
I've got to add there
go
real
ahead,
brief.
sorry.
I picked up working on a converter from the Istio, what are we calling it? The Istio operator spec to Helm values. I made some progress on it, and then I got distracted by some other stuff. I don't remember where I left that work. There may be an open pull request. I don't recall. I will drop a link in here when I find that. But I do think that that's likely one of the first steps we need to provide is a path forward for Istio operator users.
Yes.
You did have a
That's
pull
awesome.
request, Mitch.
Thank you. Sorry, Thanksgiving and the cart work has totally fried my brain.
Yeah, I think it's probably like 80% of the way there. It needs some tweaks, I think, but it's definitely a good start. I think it'll be super useful, like you said.
Sounds good. I'll go find that and start responding to feedback since I dropped the ball there.
Do you need any assistance with that, Mitch? Or you think it's just for you to get time and focus there?
If John says it's at 80%, I'll say I don't think that I need any help right now. But honestly, I don't remember what state it's in. This was from before Thanksgiving. So I'll ping you if it looks like I could use some help.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Thank you for picking that up. And the next item is this came up from the conversation in the working group around like, do we want to promote Envoy stats command? And I thought it was something we can have like a discussion on in this meeting as well. I'm curious, like, what are our general thoughts from like an enhancements perspective around like keeping permanent experiments around in our maintained code bases? And I from the conversation as well as from what we know, there are different scenarios for this. Like for instance, with the Envoy stats, there may be a simpler like non-istio alternative, like simply using curl. And I really like the consensus we arrived to where like let's see if that is a great alternative that users accept. And if it is, we have a path to drop. And then of course there's like I realize that there are some experimental features that we really just don't want to ever promote. But like, do we want that to stick around in our code bases or like move that to Istio ecosystem type approach? And then the other part, of course, is like if there's no interest in contributing to graduating the feature, then that indicates that they aren't really user incentive or demand to ensure that this stays around. So like, why should we keep it? So yeah, those are my thoughts. Just looking for general sharing of thoughts here, and like I really like the advocacy around enhancements and around this topic. So yeah, the floor is open to anyone.
I feel like there was conversations about this before with people on this call. I don't remember who, but I remember someone saying that experimental, like forever experimental, is not ideal. So maybe that's something to keep in mind.
I think you're right, Jeremy. I think the idea is to move towards an up and out sort of up or out program where things generally move forward in the maturity ladder or they are dropped. But some of the point of the enhancements group is to get us there. We know that important things are getting stuck in the pipeline. And so if we were to immediately move to up or out, I think we would lose real value for customers, but that is our objective.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It also seemed like some folks were okay with just, even if it's not moving up, they don't necessarily need it to move out. They look okay with letting it stay there. But I guess I just needed a pulse check to ensure that we are still very firm about moving even experimental stuff out of Istio.
I think also maybe it's good to, it sounds like we're thinking about the users, right? Which is good, but maybe also consider like maintainer or contributor perspectives of having to maintain something that's experimental for a very long time. There's obviously benefits to having like less code like that in the code base for the maintainers themselves. So we should also have that perspective in mind when we're thinking of like a solution here, I guess.
Yeah, that is great because we do make a lot of decisions for the user, but we do sometimes need to be the bad guy in terms of like longevity.
Well, I wouldn't even think of it as being the bad guy, because at the end of the day, if the the maintainers are like healthy in the sense of not feeling overwhelmed, that's actually good for the user, right? So it's good to have that perspective probably in all of the decisions we make. Like how does it affect us as well as we try to keep up a good quality code base?
Cool. Okay. Is there any other thoughts? Cool. If not, then
Maybe just before I was just holding up until this. Can we just revise our board? I have a couple of questions around the board too. Maybe if you still have time.
yeah, we do. That's great. Let's see.
You can just because I also kind of lost after some time. I just want to pick up something, but yeah.
Okay. So everyone should be seeing my screen now.
Yep.
And let's see the items in progress. This is in regards to the adoption of the Gateway API model for feature API versioning, and then telemetry API graduation to beta. That's sort of blocked by this one. And Imran, you were working on reviewing like outstanding issues that may be blocking telemetry API promotion.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. I found a couple of issues, and I think we just need to, after the release, we just need to review them. So that's, I think, I don't see much of a bigger impact on this. So I believe, it should be fine, I guess.
Cool. Do you think we can update this to done then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Great. And then for Celia, she is working on dual stack promotion and she has had a good bit of progress already. I think she believes she's really close to completing this. So that's the work that's in progress. Let's see what else.
Maybe,
In terms
yeah,
of, let's see, and the outreach and survey. So this was like the first step that we were taking in terms of like really
yeah.
reaching out to users. Do you have any updates here?
No, I don't have. I mean, that's what I just. I mean, I want to just either want to continue on this. I was just kind of like stuck. So since we had like survey didn't happen because we had a central survey, right? I mean, this one of the part was to create survey, so which I don't think so. It's going to happen, right? So should I just go ahead with the vendor and come up with the questions, or what's
Yes.
the? Yeah.
I
Okay.
think the vent outreach will be the key here
Next.
since we don't have a channel for users as yet. But
Yeah.
also Lynn and Istio, we sent out like a customer
Mhm.
user survey in KubeCon.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if we got to add any telemetry API questions to that, but that's a good process or example we can like leverage to see how we want to continue doing user outreach.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. For now, I'll just start with the. Yeah.
Yeah, vendor is a good place to.
Mhm. Okay. Sounds good. Okay, then I just want to clarify on this one. All right, then I'll start with vendor outreach based on the information I have. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks for bringing this up. I will spend some time cleaning up the board as well. so that anyone who is interested can see what we are currently doing and what work there is to be picked up. Cool. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I can give everyone back 25 minutes, and happy holidays.
Thanks, Whitney. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Thanks. Bye.